My name is Arman Palavan. I have the distinct pleasure of being part of the group that iBridges has put together to talk about um, the funding during COVID and post-COVID time. I would like to call it the role of money as a broader topic. So before I introduce the speakers, I just want to take a minute. I want to let you know I'm honored to be here and to be with you. My hat off to the organizers. This is amazing task you're doing. Um, so year after year, I was watching the break videos of 2014 on. I am amazed um, how many incredible people have been part of this group. So, Kamran and company, my congratulations to all of you. So again, my name is Arman Palavan. I am a partner. I'm a lawyer. So my perspectives are a little bit from the legal perspective, but I have now been doing this for almost 30 years, and I've helped, many startup companies and many mature companies in their ventures, starting with the amazing pleasure I had to work with George Soros, and then some magnificent folks like Mr. Trump, whom I represented for years, and then I came back to California and started practicing in the venture capital world. So I've been doing that for about 25 years now. What I wanted to just open up the conversation with is really the role of money, and then I will go ahead and introduce the panelists, if you don't mind, and then we'll take the session and go forward. A couple of things that really came up in the discussions that really resonated with me about what is the role of money, and how do companies get kicked off the ground, and what are the challenges that you go through during the COVID or post-COVID times, or these periods of disruption. So I think the venture capital world is all about entrepreneurs and about coming up with big dreams. So you need to first dream big. And I think we have all done that. And to those of us who've participated in some of these things, we've all started with a dream, and we've kept on dreaming, and then we've exerted our passion. And I think passion is a huge part of this thing, and folks have talked about it. And then you need to execute. So to me, that's the three things that you need to do as startup companies. And whether it's during COVID time and finding the money or not finding money, it still is the same concepts that you have to, think about. Now, we talked about, Kamran was really very, very interesting discussion about the issues of disruption. And I appreciate that. Many of you who are getting off the ground, you're thinking about disruption, how are you going to be disrupting business models, whether it's an Elon Musk kind of a story with SpaceX or with Tesla, or you have some more moderate, views on disruptions, so that they don't become such huge disruptions. But there's many of them, and the COVID time has actually been able to do wonders for some of the companies. So one of the companies that I've been very close with is Trait. They have disrupted the way mental health has been administered. And they're getting incredible success doing that now by large deployments. Sometimes it's this views of disruption, but there's also views about opportunism, right? Because this period of pandemic creates some real opportunism scenarios. Another one of our companies who's done an incredible job of the opportunity that they've driven is a company called Vitagene, where they took the Rutgers test and ran with it, which is the spit test, right? Again, so there's as we talk about the role of money, because one of the questions came, earlier, says what is the role of money? So I wanted to just talk about the role of money. It really is not in the abstract, but the role of money is really in connection with how you execute whatever money you have to go after the opportunity based on some dreams and passions. So with that opening, I'm going to introduce the panelists. And Jill, I'm going to introduce you first, if you don't mind. She is with a, she has a really two jobs. She works with a very large family office in London, and she's also a scout at ADA Ventures. So, Angel, do you want to say a few words about yourself and maybe frame the discussions that we're having about investments during the COVID and post-COVID time?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm a scout for ADA Ventures, which is a UK-based venture capital fund focused on underrepresented founders. I graduated from University College London with a degree in electronic engineering with nanotechnology, and started my career in investment advisory at PwC, doing strategic asset allocation for large family offices and sovereign wealth funds. I then became chartered financial analyst and proceeded to become a vice president at ACL, looking after investment portfolios for high net worth individuals and families. And that's when I gained a very deep understanding of kind of seed Series A deals, having led a number of them on behalf of my clients. And outside of work, I'm a founder of Iranian Women's Association, which is the first and only UK-based association established in 2014 to inspire and connect professional Iranian women. And in terms of our discussion, hopefully I'll talk about the current market conditions when it comes to funding and the activities that VCs are doing in the UK. And I'm going to give some statistics around that, and then talk about some of the available options from the government. And finally give some tips for those who are raising capital right now in these conditions.
That's great. Okay, Katrina, can we go to you then, if you'd be kind enough to say a few words about yourself. Katrina is with the European Commission, and she's very active in some amazing work that the European Commission is doing. So please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for your introduction. My name is Katarina Brunska, and indeed I work for the European Commission in Directorate General for Research and Innovation. So our main focus is on supporting researchers, but also startups, SMEs, innovators that are working on new solutions. Previously, I worked in European standardization and also in European energy regulation, so always linked to the EU as such. As a background, what we do specifically in the European Innovation Council Task Force, where I'm actually based, is, and it very much links to all the discussions that there were previously about supporting disruptive ideas, disruptive startups with game-changing innovations, which I think that, as it was said before, it's even more important to help these companies now than before in these times. The European Innovation Council is a Commission's flagship initiative for supporting these type of startups. It combines an advanced science and tech research program with an accelerated program for SMEs. So it's really a flagship initiative because it's the first time when the Commission is offering not only grant-based support, but actually mixes or blends it with equity. And I'm really pleased that Nicholas Bergman, who was part of the first panel, actually was on one of the experts that helped us designing the program. So I hope to talk about this a bit later on in our discussion.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate having you with us. Mahmoud Bolandi is our next panelist. So Mahmoud, if you would please tell us a few words about yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Arman. It's a great pleasure to be part of this panel. And we truly enjoyed and learned from previous discussions and conversations. I'm an active member of the Iranian Canadian community, and I'm based in Toronto. My background is materials science and engineering, and my journey into the world of entrepreneurship began right after graduating from McMaster University in Canada. Over the past decade, I have founded or co-founded nearly 10 startups in different industries. Caravan Canada, founded in 2016, is the first community-driven entrepreneurship network in the Iranian community in Canada. Station K, founded last year, is the Sustainable Innovation Accelerator. We had plans to launch Station K early 2020, but due to the COVID-19, it will be delayed maybe until end of this year. Allah's Tech Incorporation, founded last year, has a patent pending for an innovative fire suppression technology that we are pretty excited about this invention, and we believe this will change the future of firefighting technology and save lives and environment. I have invaluable hands-on work experience in managing nonprofits. In the past 10 years, I've had leading roles in several public and successful organizations in Canada, such as iBridges, Tirgan, Canadian Society of Iranian Engineers and Architects, Sharif University of Technology Association, and Toronto Region Immigrants Employment Council.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So let's just delve into the questions of what's going on in the world of funding, because I think our focus is what are the different opportunities for funding these companies, and obviously we will interject with our observations about the current situation, some of the opportunities. So we're breaking this up really into geographical locations. So Angela will take up London or UK, is the more proper way of saying it. Katrina will take the larger European Union, and Mahbub, you'll take Canada, and I will talk about the United States so that we can give the benefit of what we know to some of the audience in terms of the funding environment, where they can go in order to obtain potential funding for their ideas. So Angela, can you go ahead and start and tell us what's happening in the UK? What is the environment like, and where people could look for funding? So please.
Sure. In terms of current condition, I would say the supply of capital is down. If a VC firm was trying to close their fund, it is almost impossible for them to do it. LPs have, limited partners have completely shut down. Most funds have allocated 50% of their assets, so the remaining is going to be in reserves or supporting their portfolio companies. And larger funds are writing smaller checks. So no matter how you cut it, the conditions are not great. And that's why the number of deals are down 40% in the UK versus same time last year. But there is investment being made. Around £630 million were raised during the hard lockdown period in the UK, so between 23rd of March to 27th of April. And mostly was from investors allocating additional funds to ensure their portfolio companies can survive. The established late stage startups took about 94% of that funding, and 50 million or 8% went to startups that never raised significant funding. And in terms of like options from the government side, there is Innovate UK. They have 750 million available, and they've divided it to 200 million for companies that already have grants from Innovate UK, 200 million to companies that never got grants from Innovate UK, and 350 million of innovation loans. And then outside of Innovate UK, there is also the Future Fund through the British Business Bank, which is convertible loan notes on a matched basis, where a third party investor is leading the round. And that is the size between £125,000 to 5 million at an 8% interest.
So there was a lot of funds that really came out in Europe towards the end of last year, which announced like mega funds, right, were raised in the UK. And I think, Katrina, also in the EU, there was some pretty large funds that were going to be focusing on the EU market. Are those guys just taking their fees and just sitting on it? I mean, we're talking about $1 billion funds that were raised in the UK, that was announced in January of 2020. What is going on, Angel, and and Katrina with some of those funds. And then I know, Katrina, you're focused more on the European Union or the European Commission, but we'll discuss that as well. Go ahead, Angel.
Yeah, as I mentioned briefly, I think the larger funds are writing smaller checks. So those funds are active, they are making investments, but they're writing smaller checks. They are being more cautious about the size they're leading, if they're leading the round, and valuations have changed. So overall, I think there is activity from them, but on a lower valuation and smaller checks.
Interesting. So what were a couple of the names of the big funds that closed? I mean, Apex, I think, announced one, but I don't think it was in late 2000. It was earlier one. It was two that did it.
Yeah, Atomica was a very large one that was announced.
And it was $1 billion fund, right?
Yes, 850 million pounds. But and then there was also Index also announced a new fund as well. And you know, these guys are saying they're open for business. They are doing Zoom meetings and diligence as such, but obviously their due diligence process, because of the fact that they have to get investments through investment committees, is also longer than it was previously. So I think we are not seeing the data yet because those deals are still in diligence process, and we will see more of the kind of these deals in the data points soon.
Great. Okay, Katrina, how about the European Union as in general, and maybe delve a little bit deeper about what you're doing, because I think what the European Commission is doing is something really special. So what are you seeing in the current time frame?
It's true that we try to do a lot. On the equity side, we work mainly with the European Investment Fund, who is actually our implementing partner for the instruments and the programs we have. So when the lockdowns have started in Europe, which is mid-March, they have done a survey among private equity and venture capital funds on the impact of the crisis that they foresee on all the responses were quite, let's say, negative, showing a remark impact mainly when it comes to exits, their ability to fundraise and to invest. So what we did, okay, I can start on the equity side. We are still in discussions on what to actually do together with the EIF, with the European Investment Fund, and how to support the equity market. Because actually since 2014-15, we have in place an equity instrument through which the EIF invests into funds in Europe, but also in our associated countries. We have 16 of these outside of Europe, focusing on early stage investments, so usually high risk companies, and we are sector agnostic, so the investments can be made into any sectors. And since currently we really see inability of some of these funds that we had in the pipeline to close or to achieve a viable fund size, we will try to increase the amounts that the ticket sizes that we provide. So EIF provides, backed by the Commission, into these funds so that they can close and start investing. But we will also focus on the funds that we already have in the portfolio and those that aren't currently investing into the companies, to provide them to give them more leeway and firepower to invest these days, so that the companies actually that otherwise would be healthy and need money right now actually receive them. So that's on the equity side, and there we're still in discussions. Actually, the programs or the further support is not yet in place. But on the equities, on the debt side, we've already done a lot. It was actually one of the first steps that the Commission has done already mid-March, early April, when we've unlocked 1 billion euros that was still unused in the current programs, and we made them available through the EIF to financial intermediaries in the EU member states. So when I talk about intermediaries, I mean public and private banks and alternative lenders, which can then provide actually unlocking 8 billion of working capital loans. And
you said 8 billion, was that the number?
Yes.
Great.
In loans. And so companies that are interested can then look at the EIF website at the specific instruments, which is SME guarantee or COSME loan guarantee facility, and they will find the intermediaries that actually receive the guarantee backed by the EU, and which can provide the working capital loans or investment loans with usually, or it should be with more favorable conditions and terms.
Great. So I want to just put a little bit of color on this. You know, the audience. Just one moment. I want to just confirm how much time we have. One of the issues is that for the audience is that when we're talking about debt or equity, when Katrina is talking about it, these are two different kinds of instruments, right? So, and what Angel was talking about was also an investment by venture capital funds into companies. These are in terms of equity investments that will put the money up and they don't expect to be repaid back until the company exits, or you have enough revenues that you could, you know, send some dividends out and repay the investors, right? Also, what Katrina was discussing was debt investments that the European Commission is putting together, large pools of cash. What I heard was $8 billion, and I'm not sure that's the only amount that's available, but there's probably other amounts available that will have the ability for investment in a promissory note, in effect, that you have to pay back over time. And these kind of incentives for growth of innovation is done with an expectation that you would actually return the money. So that's what we're talking about. I will address the United States later, but Mahbub, if you would be kind enough to just tell us what's happening in Canada and what kind of incentives are there available, because I think in the UK and the US, being the more capitalist societies, frankly, I think these availabilities of larger investments in innovation startups are mostly coming from the private sector. But my understanding is that Mahbub, in Canada, there's also a fair amount of incentives that's come from the government. And if you would just address that, please. Go ahead, Mahbub.
Sure, I will try to mention these funds in two sections. One, the funds that the government of Canada provided after COVID-19. And in the other section, I will mention about the grants that Canadian government is providing. Right after the COVID-19 outbreak, the government of Canada took immediate action to help Canadians facing hardship as a result of the pandemic. Through Canada's COVID-19 economic response plan, the government has provided $149 billion in total direct support to Canadian workers and businesses. $25 billion for Canada Emergency Business Account, which provides up to $40,000 interest-free loans for small businesses. Bank of Development of Canada co-lending program provides $12.5 million for operational cash flow requirements. And again, BDC, Bank of Development of Canada, matching investment program for Canadian VC-backed companies which are affected by COVID-19. Another program is business credit availability, where Export Development Canada is working with financial institutions to guarantee 80% of new operating credit up to $6.25 million to small and medium-sized enterprises. Regional Relief and Recovery Fund provides $962 million interest-free loans nationally to support fixed operating costs for SMEs, and the list goes on and on. The Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, which provides a 75% wage subsidy to eligible employers. temporary wage subsidy for employers. Again, additional $250 million through the Industrial Research Assistance Program, which is called IRAP, to assist innovative early stage companies that are unable to access other COVID-19 business supports. More than $20 million in support for Futurepreneur Canada to continue supporting young entrepreneurs across Canada for ages between 18 and 39. And $15 million in new funding to support women entrepreneurs through the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy. If you want me, I can go to the grants available, but
I think that this is really a great framework, Mahbub, for what you put together. I mean, the numbers, again, when you're saying 15 million or 8 billion or whatever the numbers are that we're throwing around, they kind of almost have no meaning, because if you take $15 million for women entrepreneurs and there's, 1,500 women applying, the numbers become skewed. But what I think your point is that there's plenty of initiatives that are available in Canada for these kinds of endeavors directed specifically at startups. Katrina, I think your point also is that the European Commission is in fact taking some real serious active roles, and my understanding is that some of these programs are 7-year programs. The European Commission is looking at a 7-year program to fund startups starting now. Am I correct?
Yes, and actually I wanted to come back on this point because at the very beginning you mentioned that this discussion is going to be about money and how to use money effectively. Exactly as you say, the Commission works with 7 years programs, and right now this year we are at the last year of one of the 7-year period, which means that the budget we have available for this year is quite limited since it's the last year, and we really have to use the money effectively. And what we tried to do at the beginning of COVID was to refocus the budget that we had to supporting startups and SMEs through the programs I've mentioned, but also through supporting the development of COVID-related vaccines, treatments, and diagnostics, which also is important at this time. So we were, let's say, balancing or focusing on these two priorities. But starting as of 2021, it is a new budgetary program for us, which actually still has to be approved. And the new version of that program was launched or announced only on Wednesday, so a few days ago. And it really marks a turning point for the EU, I would say as such, because the new program or instrument, a recovery instrument that was announced is of 750 billion euros. It will be the first time the Union actually will be raising this money on the market, and it will be repaying the funds later on through its future budget. And the recovery will, of course, focus on, or part of it will focus on investments and reinjecting the money into the economy, focusing on supporting companies that are active in the digital sector, but also in green economy, because the two main priorities of the commissions are green and digital. And there will be also a big focus on supporting startups and SMEs. And part of this, let's say, solution or package will also be the European Innovation Council that I mentioned at the very beginning, which we currently have in a pilot phase through an accelerated pilot, but it will continue later, so since 2021. And the budget which was proposed for the EIC previously was 10 billion for these 7 years. And let's see whether this actually is approved by the member states, because the budget, as I said, still has to be approved.
Worked out. So just talking about this issue, Angel, aren't you sorry that the UK went forward with the Brexit so that they couldn't have access any longer to this huge pile of cash?
I think a lot of people are sorry about that.
You're jealous now that you can't quite tap into the EU's money. But on that note, Angel, is the UK must have some initiatives as well, but are they focused the way the European Commission is doing directed at startups? Because I can tell you the United States doesn't, and I'll tell you what the US is doing after you answer the question.
There's the Future Fund that was announced specifically for startups by the British Business Bank. And these are the convertible loan notes. And because the government needs to get comfortable about the diligence process, they have asked for a third-party investor to take the lead. So it's only on a matched basis. And it's the company must have raised £250,000 in equity in the last 5 years to qualify. So as long as the startup qualifies, they can definitely apply for that on the website of British Business Bank. And already, they said that it's a first come first served basis. And already, if the numbers are right, they're almost finished with that fund, which is about 250 million pounds. So I think if there is a company that fits the criteria, they should definitely apply as soon as possible.
Right.
And then in terms of the Innovate UK grants, they're also available for startups, but the kind of grants have different categories. So you have to be specifically in digital healthcare or digital construction or specific industries. Mm-hmm. And that has another 750 million in various forms available.
Those are grants you mentioned.
Yes.
Those are grants. So Mahbub, I want to keep on talking about the United States, but I love to hear about what you guys are all doing outside the US, but I'll get to the US. Mahbub, so what are these tax credits that the Canadian government has? It's become a little bit of an interesting place for a lot of Iranians to migrate to, because the immigration rules are a little bit more lax than the United States. And these grants are actually real ways for Iranian entrepreneurs to tap into if they're starting new companies. Could you let me know what the role of the tax credit is?
Sure. If you let me, before that, I want to frame the whole grant system in Canada, and then I will go for that tax incentive. As we heard from Carmen Elahian this morning, future belongs to innovation economy. And Canada is in a global innovation race. The nation is competing with countries around the world for the most talented people, newest technologies, and the fastest growing companies. Regardless of pandemic, annual Canadian government grants exceed $26 billion. Innovation Canada has 33 programs and services that one of the largest one is tax incentive that you, Arman, mentioned about that. The flagship programs and services are designed to foster innovation, create jobs, and grow Canada's economy. One of the important programs is the Innovative Superclusters Initiative. This program provides $950 million over 5 years, starting 2017, to support business-led innovation superclusters. Some examples are AI-powered supply chain supercluster and advanced Canadian manufacturing supercluster. The next important program is a Strategic Innovation Fund that provides $2.2 billion, and it's for large innovative projects over $10 million in requested contribution. This program is supporting scale-up, R&D, and commercialization of cutting-edge ideas. $2.3 billion for clean technology, and as I mentioned, the scientific research and experimental development tax incentive that you asked is the single largest federal program that supports business R&D in Canada and provides $3 billion in tax incentive to over approximately 20,000 claimants annually. Generally, your work qualifies as SHRED, which is the acronym of the Scientific Research and Experimental Development. If you are doing a systematic investigation or search to advance science or technology through experiment or analysis. These may include expenditure for labor costs up to 66%, It could include materials, contracts, overhead, and third-party payments. To be eligible, as we were talking the other day about this, the work for the most part must be conducted in Canada and must be, as I mentioned, either basic research, applied research, or experimental development.
Right. So this is so you establish your company in Canada, or some of the U.S. companies come and establish subsidiaries in Canada. They will then employ Canadian help in R&D, field. Then you will figure out at the end of the year what is the percentage of your expenditure in the company that went to R&D, and based on that number, you would make an application to the Canadian government or the Treasury or the tax authorities, and you will get a refund from the Canadian government, an amount equal to eligibility percentage of that R&D. So there's an actual cash that comes back to you as a company for your expenditure in R&D. So this is not a COVID-related concept, but it's really been eligible for a long time, and a lot of companies have taken advantage of it. Now, in the U.S.,
just make it clear, Armanjan, one of the forms are refund as cash, but the other two forms could be income tax deduction and investment tax credit. And a good thing about this scientific research and experimental development tax credit program is that you don't have to prepare a proposal and wait for approval from the government.
right.
You can design and run your project and then make your tax claim the following year.
Understood, but that presumes that you actually have revenues that you're paying taxes on, which most startup companies are losing money on. But I want to get to the US market. We really have 7 minutes to kind of like go through some of the questions that have also come up. I've tried to incorporate some of those questions that have come from the audience, so not all of you know what the questions are coming, but some of them have been addressed here. In the US market, we are a capitalist society, and we are far short of Canada and far short of what the European Commission is doing. There is large numbers of cash that is coming through the Congress for approvals for startup, not for startups, but for just advancing the economy and try to be a stop measure to the bleeding that's going on with all the businesses in the United States. These are governed usually through the Small Business Administration. They deal with smart businesses typically. There is some exceptions. I don't think it's worth going into them. There's some, for larger companies, but I think the focus here for startup companies and innovation. Typically, there is a program called the PPP program, which is a Paycheck Protection Plan. And then there's a second program called the Economic Injury Disaster Loans, EIDL. I have to always look up the acronym for the second one. The PPP program is a forgivable loan that has been available to businesses, and the amount is 2.5 times your payroll looking back. Whatever that was, they're going to give you a loan for 2.5 times your monthly payroll, and they'll give it to you as a form of a loan with a 1% interest and 2-year maturity dates that could be forgivable if on a going forward basis for this ensuing 8 weeks after you receive the actual cash, you can go ahead and deploy it for payroll purposes and lease and some utilities and other eligible expenditures. Those have never been designed, or initially they were not designed for the purpose of startup community, though the startup community has taken advantage of this, but there's some real technicalities that people have, it's dissuaded some of the startups from following through with this. The other program, the EIDL program, is a program which companies that have inventory. So if you have a startup company that actually is selling hardware, you can apply for it. They are, again, not meaningful loans. What we have seen in practice, they've been $20,000 to $50,000. The PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Plan, those have been actually more meaningful. Some of our startups have actually applied for us to the extent you have $1 million or $800,000 of payroll for a company of, let's say, 40 to 50 people, and you still are in the development phase and you're losing money. Those companies have actually applied and taking advantage of these programs. So they've gotten $1 million checks, but they have to spend it on appropriate, expenditures. So then there's the SBIR grants and some of the grants that have been generally available. So one of the questions that came is, are there any US-based COVID-19 related funding that could be mentioned here? The answer is there are some programs. They are not, completely out there. You should do a check on seeing whether or not COVID-19 related funding, if this is specific grants are available for COVID-19 funding. You can find out some of this information on the COVID-19 website, and you can apply for them. We haven't seen anything really significant in this space, so I can't be of any help there. But another question came regarding the aerospace specialist working on electrical air taxes in Germany, and what kind of a VC fundings are available for that. What I have seen for these kinds of things is the place where you really start is some of these accelerators that are industry focused. So I would imagine, and Angel and Catherine, you may know more about this. There may be, or too bad Anusha is not on the line. And by the way, to get in touch with any of us, please use our LinkedIn accounts and correspond with us. Certainly in my panel, we'll be happy to correspond with you. Angel, do you know, or Katrina, do you know any accelerators that are focused on aerospace?
I think the main question is, what stage is this company at? If they are in obviously very early idea generation accelerator, there are large companies like Siemens and industrial companies that do have corporate accelerator as well, that could be a strategic investor. But if you're past that point and you're more on the pre-seed seed stage, then I would look at some of the larger funds. I know, for example, Atomico has previously invested in a company that is hovering cars. So they would definitely take a look at this. And if you're on a later stage, like Series A, B, then I would definitely say have a look at Balderton. But because this is quite an innovative field, you could also look at innovation grants, which I'm sure Katerina can add to that in terms of the EU side of innovation grants.
Katrina, do you have any thoughts about the space exploration, industry funding?
Actually, it's quite interesting because late last year we made a specific pilot for investing into space-focused funds, or funds with space strategy. So under Innofin Equity, you can see which funds we've supported. I know there's only one right now, but there are others coming, other deals coming hopefully in the coming months. So I know that the links will be provided also after this session, probably next week. So you will be able to look there.
Yeah,
I know we're short.
Great. I mean, on some of these questions, and there's a couple of questions, for example, even on the COVID issue that was raised. I know Yasamin is here, so we need to quieten down pretty fast, but I'll just finish up this question. There is these accelerators that are specific to healthcare are great places, even if you're somewhat advanced and you've raised some money and are able to show that the product is available and you can get into them. Is a very good place to look for some of these industry specific funding, because what we're talking about is just the larger funding. And with that, I just want to just a couple of parting words. So in the US, there was some discussion around how much funding has come into different sectors. Angel was talking about some of the decrease in funding. So in the US for the Q1, we basically were on par with the Q1 of last year. Generally, it was not a big difference in terms of funding. And some of the funds are starting to look at the other, are looking at companies. We've had 2 investments that have closed in the software kind of a space. So I think we will get through this. Where I would suggest all of you to continue looking is to the concept of dreaming big, having great passion, finding the opportunity and execute. On that note, you may know of the company PolyUp, which is a math kind of a software company. and I've been somewhat in a distant way associated with them. But they've had these opportunities to go to, to Palestine and various other places to integrate the software with the educational system of Palestine. So don't stop looking for opportunities. We will all get through this. I am thrilled that I was part of this panel. Thank you all for participating, and thanks to the iBridges, network and group for keeping on putting these amazing programs together. Yasmin, back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.